Uh, you were at Copenhagen. Some developing countries, some rich countries were not happy with the outcome. Some saw it as an important step forward. I'd just be interested in your perspective on this.
Um, First of all, I did a lot of work running up to Copenhagen. For some reason or another, I thought that the world had finally come to its senses and that we were all becoming much more convinced that it was very important to assemble, come together, and reach an agreement in Copenhagen that would move us in the direction of the low carbon economy. So, coming out of Copenhagen, I have to say that I was uh, very distressed. I can only remember perhaps 2, 3 episodes in my life that brought me down so far as coming back from Copenhagen after spending the entire month there with something we put together called the Global Observatory to report in real time the negotiating process to people around the world. I came back out of Copenhagen after spending the month there completely distraught. Perhaps because we all need to be positive in our lives to continue on, but perhaps because of the additional time of reflection after having left Copenhagen, I have come 180 degrees to believe that not only is there a glass, but it also is half full instead of the half empty glass that I saw in Copenhagen. And I say that there is a glass and it is half full for several reasons. To begin with, I have seen many political documents and agreements and memorandums of understanding and everything else. I have never seen one that is anchored on the science. And the Copenhagen Accord, which is the 3-pager that came out subscribed by 5 countries, is anchored on science. It says basically scientists are telling us that we should not go over 450 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere, not to go over 2 degrees centigrade with respect to changes in climate. When have we seen a political declaration that is anchored on the science? So to me, this is refreshing. To have science illustrate the political policy-making formulation process is revolutionary, and it is, quite frankly, a step forward. Second point, you look at the 5 leaders that were in that room negotiating an agreement, the Copenhagen Accord. President Obama, Prime Minister Xing, Prime Minister Wenjibao, President Zuma of South Africa, and President Lula of Brazil. None of those is a white Anglo-Saxon. Interesting observation with respect to the new reality of the world. In a world where the US still wants to appoint the president of the World Bank, Europe wants to appoint the president of the IMF, and there is little recognition for how the world has shifted towards the East in economic terms, and how emerging countries are playing much more of a role. Very interesting that you had these 5 leaders there, and none was a white Anglo-Saxon. I guarantee you would have never seen that 10 years ago. Third, you look at the nations they've represented. The United States, China, India, South Africa, and Brazil. Only one is an OECD nation. When have you ever seen that before? Again, a recognition, very realistically based on what the new world is all about in terms of searching for new cooperation amongst actors that were not always invited to the table. Fourthly, I believe that the Copenhagen Accord, struck by 5 countries, brings us back to our senses in terms of understanding that to move on anything in the world of today, it is impossible to have a unanimous accord of all nations. Now, when did we ever begin to think that we were going to get a unanimous accord in Copenhagen from 193 countries? We need to abandon that idea, and we need to be much more pragmatic and practical. In the world of today, most countries are democracies. We have some countries that are not. Do we hold back on democracy because some are not? Absolutely not. In the world of today, most nations respect human rights. Some don't. Do we hold back on human rights because some countries don't respect and abide by them? Absolutely not. So in the world of today, when we need to move forward as a planetary family with respect to climate change, why should we expect to have on board every single country? It's not the reality. It's not what we do in other fields. We should not place for ourselves a bar that is much higher with respect to climate change than what it is for democracy or for human rights or for so many other issues that are really of global concern. The way that countries have come around to adhere to the Copenhagen Accord, I believe, opens a window of opportunity moving forward for us to be able to advance with a global agreement that I would call of variable geometries, where we respect the internal political processes of some countries and understand that they cannot come to the table right now, right today, but that they are moving in the right direction. And where we take into consideration the economic realities of some other countries in terms of how they can come to the table. So, if I can sum it up, fighting climate change is not running a 100-meter race where it is critically important that every person in the race has the same point of departure, because even a millimeter or an inch can make a difference on the finish line. Winning the battle against climate change is a marathon. It is 42 kilometers. And so in a race of 42 kilometers, you can afford yourself the luxury of being a meter behind the starting point or 2 meters ahead of it. Those small differences, in the long term, the 42 kilometers will iron themselves out. Let's therefore adopt, moving forward with respect to climate change, an agreement of variable geometries that respects different starting points for different nations around the world, gets them all to contribute and compete in the same race, which is a race to migrate towards the low-carbon economy. And as we move forward, we will find ways of cooperating and competing and making sure that we all move in that direction.
Well, thank you so much.